Hi there, my name is Tap Nuo, and I'm a techno artist from Los Angeles. Today's video will be kind of related to techno, but not just techno. It'll be an electro-house bass design tutorial. And what I'm going to be showing you today is the lead bass on a soon-to-be-released track of mine, which will be part of Techno Mixtape 3. Stay tuned for that. And I'm taking my sound in a electro-house sort of direction, still keeping things very techno regarding the arrangement and like minimal production in the sense of like keeping it very raw. But let's go ahead and listen to what we've got so far. And side note, I am in downtown LA and I do have the window open, so you might be hearing some stuff. I put a gate on the microphone, but who knows what will come through the gate. So anyways, let's go ahead and listen to what we got that we'll be breaking down today. So very gritty, very in-your-face style of bass line, something that cuts through the mid-range quite nicely. And when I started this, I took a similar approach to the way I make music in the sense of like starting with an oscillator and keeping it very simple regarding the musicality of it, because electro house is a very glitchy genre. It's a very like editing-based genre. So is techno as well. But I started with the expand instrument, and for sake of example, let me turn off the arpeggiator because I did engage that. So I started with just this. So kind of like a 303 style, synth line that is just one note continuous. And then I turned on the arpeggiator, and here's what we get with that. So giving it some movement, right? But it's still very thin. It's not very aggressive, and it could be fattened up quite a bit. So from there, I went to one of my go-to plugins, which is Filter Freak. And I started with the distorted 16th preset. And of course, I always start with a preset and then go from there. Sometimes I just start dialing in settings based on what I'm familiar with. But let's see what happens when I put that on. So giving it some more character, giving it some more movement, you can hear some resonance coming through on the filters. And then from there, I wanted to dirty it up a little bit. So I added the lo-fi, which is essentially a bit crusher. And you'll notice here, I really only have the clip distortion up and the mix is not all the way in. So it's kind of running in parallel a little bit. Now from there, I just kind of found some frequencies that I didn't love, and I tuned those down just a little bit. So it doesn't make too much of a difference. It just kind of evens out the sound a little bit. And I was really happy with that as a starting point. And I wanted to keep the level at a place where I knew I could print it. So once I had that, I went ahead and made that track inactive. Printed it into here. Now let's solo that, and let's take off all the plugins on that channel. So that's just the audio version of what is coming out of that MIDI channel, right? Now the first thing I did once I printed it was I added the vintage filter. And so that has an LFO on it, which is not coming in all the way and has some resonance just a little bit. And I kind of found a sweet spot for the cutoff so that the LFO could start talking at the right frequency range, at least in my opinion, and then also added some distortion through the internal drive on that filter. Now, once I had that, I was really happy with it. And I wanted to keep that evolution of the sound going. So I added a Talkbox and took the filter down, the formant down, found a vowel that really worked, and then added a little bit of an LFO. And you can already hear it's literally talking more. And so I was really happy with that, but then I was like, well, let's keep it going. Let's see how else we can thicken this sound up, right? And so a wave folder was inserted onto the channel. And this is really just like a type of distortion. And so what I did is I just was going through some of these presets. This is a free plugin by Melda. I definitely recommend checking it out. So let's see what happens when I add that into the channel. And it's not coming in all the way, 75%, but it already adds so much bite to the original signal. And when that happened, it was really starting to go in that electro-house direction that I had thought in my head of where it could go. And that's what I want you to remember is when you're doing sound design, don't fight the flow, and you don't need to add like 100 plugins to get to where you're trying to go. You have to just be very intentional on what you want the next step in the chain to be. So once I had like the bounce of it, I was like, okay, it needs more grit. And so that's where this wave folder comes in. And then from there, I wanted to change the timbre of the sound just a little bit. And this is another stock Pro Tools plugin. It's an enhancer. It's kind of like a harmonic generator, but it like peaks at certain frequencies. And I was going through presets, and the mid refresh was a good starting point. So I tweaked it a little bit from there. Now let's hear what that does. So that really changes it. It really pushes it more forward in the mix. And that's exactly what I was going for. So then I printed that into a third channel. And I'm a big fan of printing things, doing things in stages, and freezing what you got. Because there's no reason, like if you're happy with something, even if you've only added a few plugins throughout the process, like freeze it and just keep going. Don't question those initial choices that you made. Always trust your gut as a producer. So I printed it into another channel, and let's go ahead and take those plugins off. And the first thing I did was, after all those harmonics had been added, it needed a little bit of EQing. And this is just that simple, like, boost, sweep, and then kind of pull back down decision. And found some frequencies that just didn't really need to be there. And I mean, you won't hear too much of a difference when I play that. So from there, I tried to find where the fundamental was sitting and added the Waves Max Bass, which is essentially just a harmonic generator to thicken up the low end of it. So added that. Gives it more sub. From there, very simple. I probably could have used another plugin for this. Come on, Pro Tools. There we go. So I just did a low cut, 30 hertz, just to get those like unhearable frequencies out, because it adds headroom to the overall sound. And then from there, one of my go-to plugins, you'll see this in every single one of my tutorials, the Kramer. And the Kramer just boosts it a little bit. I really just boosted the top. And then that's how I got the fundamental characteristics of the sound. Now, you'll see here on the final version of it, there are some sends. So it's going to a stereo, essentially a widening aux, and then a plate, which is also used for imaging just to add some depth to the sound, and then some bass distortion. So let's go ahead and check those out. The way the signal processing is on the, let's see, the bass stereo. So let's do that one first. So that dry signal is sending into an aux, which is playing, as you'll see, it's playing pretty low. I tried to blend it in tastefully. And this is where a lot of the finesse in sound design comes from. It's like adding very subtle things to it that when you mute it, you notice it. But when it's in there, it makes the sound just a little bit larger than life. So on the stereo channel, I cut out all the sub because it just doesn't need to be there, especially for anything really wide. There's no reason for it to exist in a wide state below 100 hertz, because low end should always be mono. So Talkbox, and what that's doing, it's just putting a vowel in at like 25, 26%, very tastefully with the formant shifted down. And then lo-fi, which really this is just doing some distortion and saturation. And then a chorus to further widen it, and that's at 100%. And then the free wider plugin, and it's not all the way, but I didn't put it all the way because the chorus was already wide. And this is a mono compatible plugin, so you can go a little more extreme with it because it's an algorithmic based approach towards stereo imaging. So from there, I had the bass stereo send, and then let's go and analyze the plate. And the plate's very simple. The plate is literally just the mid and top frequencies coming into the lexicon reverb. And I was going through a lot of the plate presets, kind of seeing what sounded good, and with the aux all the way up at a very high volume to really hear an extreme version of it, and then tastefully bring it back in. And I had to adjust the time a little bit to make it fit with the tempo of the record, but also the amount of space I wanted. And then regarding the bass distortion, it's very simple. It's just an enhancer, which is a similar version of the enhancer that I have on the actual bass. It's going into that, and then it's going into the lo-fi with the clip engaged. And so that's just adding more color to it. And that's really the only one that's playing at unity volume. As you'll see, the plate is playing really low, and the stereo aux is also playing pretty low. So once I had that main groove, because again, that is kind of coming from the arpeggiator from that initial MIDI channel. Once I had that in, I kind of chopped it up. And I can't reveal the rest of the record, but it will be a combination of that original melody with some chops, and of course a filter engaged to, tuck it into the mix, bring it back up, make it come more forward. But that's my approach towards electro-house style bass lines. Not every single time, of course. Sometimes I do my traditional sine wave technique where I just start literally by going by the math of it. But what is that instrument? The expand instrument has a lot of great starting points, and that's something I'm going to be exploring more, especially I think it's kind of slept on as a free instrument, as a stock instrument. I think as producers, we're always told we need to buy new plugins and buy new stuff that has, better sounds, but those stock plugins are there for a reason. Now, the last thing I will say is that sine wave approach, I did take that regarding the sub, and I just tried to match the melody that was playing, or the timing of the sub, with the lead bass. And on that, just have some slight tonal differences, so it's not playing the exact same sine wave each time, and there's some distortion on that as well. But the sine wave is a good way to go when you're doing bass for something like this, because it's such a pure signal, and it only has a little bit of distortion and saturation on it. So most of the mid-range bass and low mid bass is actually coming from something like this Max Bass plugin. But for just those larger systems where you really want it to knock and sound balanced, that's where that sub layer comes in handy. So thank you very much for checking out today's video. Any sort of sound design tutorials you're looking for, please hit me up in the comments. And I am really excited to release this track. The last thing I will say about it is it will be called Far Life, and it'll be 128 beats per minute. My next mixtape will have stuff like this. It'll have some straight up warehouse stuff, potentially even some hip hop. And I just want to expand people's perception of what techno is. So thank you so much. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, Hit me on Twitter, hit me on Instagram. Have a great rest of your evening.